have David Stevens on our QuaranZine series of videos of interviews. And David, we and I have known each other since I think 2011.
I think
It's
so.
almost a decade. So we're coming up next year. We got to celebrate. We got to do something fun. So, and you do so many amazing things up in Atlanta, and we both have a tremendous love of puppets and puppetry and Muppets and that whole world of entertainment. So I wanted to introduce you to all of our viewers and readers, and get a little information and talk to you about your history and career, and go from there. So
Sure.
let's start with, what was your earliest memory of puppets?
Oh gosh, probably like a lot of people in our age group, the Muppets were probably the first thing I remember about seeing or experiencing puppets of any kind. So like Sesame Street, the Muppet Show. I was born in '77, so it's like the Muppets were in their prime. So they were, had their show and they were on Sesame Street. So it was hard to miss the Muppets if you were of our generation.
Right, exactly.
And there was just something, captivating about them, and it just, for whatever reason, latched onto them. And I was a diehard fan.
Who was your favorite Muppet?
Dr. Teeth, I think he was my favorite, and I'm not really sure why. Probably it had to do with like the combination of movement and color, and he was real big and brash,
Right.
and sort of really bombastic voice, and he was just a presence. And there was probably just something about that I think that I found attractive.
And so obviously you're a big fan of Jim Henson. Was he a big inspiration in getting you into puppetry? And
Absolutely. I sort of
had to him. I know you've met, or you've worked either or met with some of his family. Kind of go into that.
Yeah. I would sort of gorge whatever Muppet stuff I could get. I grew up in the boonies where there were no cable or anything. So, but there were some very nice people in my life who who had cable and were nice enough to record Muppets when they were in syndication and reruns and Fraggle Rock and all that stuff. So I had access to it because of these wonderfully kind-hearted people who were contributing to my education. Little did they know. And I guess I was about 13 when I started making puppets. But when I was in 5th grade, I had this sort of like aha moment. Our teacher had assigned each of us a section in the history book to do a report on, and the particular section I got was about the gold rush of 1849, and I dreaded the idea of having to get up in front of the class and give a report. Like that was just, I did not want to do that. So
Yeah.
I had this idea that I would use puppets, and so I didn't really have puppets. I had some paper things that were made in craft class or whatever, so they weren't, they weren't even really store-bought puppets at that point either.
Hmm.
And I remember I'd sort of read the section, and I had figured out, okay, these are going to be the characters, this historical figure and this historical figure. But I didn't have a script. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing improv. And so I got behind the table, and I could see my teacher. She was off to the side in my eye line, and whatever I did, it entertained my classmates and the teacher, like Miss Harris. They were all sort of captivated by whatever this was I was doing, which I didn't even know what it was I was doing. But I realized that was that moment where I had that sort of validation for this thing I'd always been into. And Miss Harris was so taken by it that she wanted me to do it for the class next door. Well, I was freaking out because I'd made up the whole thing. Like I'd improv'd it, and I didn't remember what I had done or why. It was funny. Like I had none of those muscles. I was just doing it. It was just visceral. And so there was this poor next door class and the teacher who were all kind of looking at me like, a poor facsimile of whatever experience I had just given that class. So that was kind of like the real moment that solidified for me, okay, there's something here, like, and there's something I like, and it's this communication that I really enjoy. There's a connection that was made, and it was like a light switch in me that just said, puppets, I want to do that. And then as I got older, I started learning how to make more sophisticated puppets, learning how to sew and do all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until, I guess, a few years later, I met a puppeteer from Richmond, Virginia, named Schneider. and he was really the one that sort of helped me figure out how to make Muppet style puppets, which is really what I was after. I didn't want to make copies of Muppets. Like, I didn't want to make my own Cookie Monster or any of that. I wanted to make characters that were in my head that were in that style of mouth puppet. And so he really gave me the tools to be able to take ideas and then map them out as drawings and then form them into three-dimensional puppets. And that was a real gift, learning how to do that.
How old did that happen?
I think I was about 15 or 16, somewhere in there. I think it was in high school by that point. And I joined the Puppeteers of America, and it started going to their festivals. So I was exposed to a lot more puppet stuff. And then when I was in college, I interned at the Center for Puppetry Arts, and then I went to University of Connecticut and studied puppetry for my grad school. So I have a master's in puppet arts. So it was kind of this layered, multi-layered experience of like my education. That was a little bit of self-taught, some old-fashioned mentor apprenticeship, and formal institutions as well. And then when I got out of grad school, I started creating. I was performing by that point, but I really sort of in earnest began my company, All Hands Productions, in 2000, and started doing library shows and larger venues, the Center for Puppetry Arts, and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where the connection with the Henson family came in. I started doing shows at the Center for Puppetry Arts, which is here in Atlanta. Heather Henson happened to be in the audience one Sunday for one of those shows, which I didn't know. Like, it was a complete surprise. And that's sort of really, we met each other a few times, but that was the first time she'd really seen my work. And that was what really forged a relationship, was that experience. And then from there on, I got to meet her mother, Jane, and Jane and I were very close for the sort of latter years of her life, and the rest of the family, the rest of the siblings, Cheryl and Lisa and Brian. So.
Right. That's amazing. How are all they personally? It's that's like a dream connection.
They're lovely people. I mean, my experiences with the family were all exceedingly positive. Jane and I, we laughed a lot. I mean, we talked a lot for sure. I think she admitted to me there was a lot that sort of reminded her about Jim, which humbled me to no end. It was like, right. I felt kind of uncomfortable hearing that, but whatever, I'm just me. And but the exchanges and the time I have spent with the family it was just like being with family. It wasn't like being with these austere, puppet royalty.
They are.
Considers them to be, but they're just people, and we had a lovely time. They all have great senses of humor, and they're very relatable. So, yeah.
Did you ever do any work with any of them, like in any Muppet related?
Yeah, I worked. I think the first thing I did, I worked a season on Sesame Street in 2008, which I think that was season 39. I did 2 episodes. I was a background puppeteer. I did an Anything Muppet and a cow, and that's sort of my claim to fame.
An Anything Muppet, is that what it is?
Yeah. So an Anything Muppet is basically it's a puppet blank, and you can put different eyes and nose and hair and costume. You can change all that up, and so they can have one puppet can be a myriad of characters over the course of its existence as a puppet. So I was one of those, and which was really exciting. I mean, that was kind of the dream come true to be able to like play in that sandbox, even for as temporary as the time as it was.
Was that in New York?
Mm-hmm, yeah, they shoot in at the Kaufman Astoria Studios, which is up in Astoria, New York, outside Queens, and it was great fun. And then the other sort of Henson project I worked on was a staged musical adaptation of Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. That started as a children's book that was written by Russell and Lillian Hoban, and then Jim Henson created a TV special based on the book in the 70s, 1979.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah, and then in 2008, Paul Williams collaborated with Christopher Gattelli, who was a Broadway director and choreographer, to create a 2-hour musical version of based on the television version that So it was a lot. It was all those characters, some extended storylines, and we ran that for 2 years at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut, and which was really idyllic. I mean, the opera house looked like it came out of that world, like the whole little village there in East Haddam looked like it could have been out of Waterville.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool. So those were the two big Henson projects. I'd worked on some other little stuff for Muppets that was never for public consumption, but yeah, so I had some dabblings in that official Henson Muppet Sesame world.
That Emmett Otter performance too, that you actually played banjo with the puppet, working the puppet and playing banjo. Can you kind of go into how that worked and all the intricacies behind doing something as insane
Sure.
as that?
So when I auditioned for this show, I knew there would be some Henson people at the audition, but I knew they were all Broadway people. And so Broadway auditions are a little different than puppet auditions. Normally, if it's a puppet audition, it's kind of like an acting one. You get some sides, and you go in, and maybe there's a puppet, maybe not. But for a musical, it's like, well, what do you do? Like, do you do music? It's like you come in with 6 bars of a classic musical that they're. It's like, do you give them something that they are familiar with so they can discern whether or not you have. It's a different kind of mindset. Right. So I came in with options. I'd prepared a couple of pieces, one from Big River, and I think something from The Robber Bridegroom, just that were sort of like traditional musical numbers. And then I also brought my banjo, and I couldn't really decide if I should go in the audition room with the prepared Broadway, the musical numbers, or if I should take the banjo. And the people that were in the sort of little corral waiting to go in, they were like, "Take your banjo. Just go in and take your banjo." So I go in the room, and there are all these, the Broadway people that are the director and the, writer, book writer, and all this stuff. They're all sitting behind the table, looking down, looking at, okay, who's this guy? And I have my banjo, and I just start in and sing one of my songs called Biscuits and Gravy, and they all just sort of looked up with the mouths agape, going like, who is this guy? And so really what they wanted is they wanted me to be able to do that with a character in the show called Yancey Woodchuck. And Yancey has sort of this real bit part in the musical, but it's in the teleplay version, but he really is sort of a linchpin moment, because the boys in the jug band have prepared this song called Barbecue that they're going to sing, and unbeknownst to them, Yancey Woodchuck goes out, and that's the song he sings, and they have to prepare another number right on the spot, and it sort of puts a chink in their plans. But so they wanted the puppet to be able to play the banjo. Well, this required some real work on the workshop's part. So it was a 3-person operation. Tyler Bunch, who's a great Sesame puppeteer, Henson puppeteer, he was operating the head. I was doing the voice, so he was manipulating the lip sync to my voice. I was performing the hands of the puppet, which were in gloves, and there was a real miniature-sized banjo that he would play every night. And then there was another puppeteer named Annie Ozar, who was his feet. So she would choreograph we made this whole dance routine for him to do while he played and sang the song. And it was great. Like, it was a really great effect, though we discovered that most people did not connect the fact that the puppet was actually playing the banjo. So we tried to throw in all sorts of little things, like he would tune the banjo so that it would start out a whack, and then he'd strum it, and it would be obviously out of tune, and he would literally, you'd see him with the tuning pegs and get it up to tune, and then go into the number. So we kept trying to figure out ways to sort of tip the hat that the puppet is actually doing this. Some didn't get it, and then when some audience members were finally told, when after the show we talk about it, they would go, "What?" It was this really cool thing. But yeah, so I think the reason I was cast in that role was because I could play the banjo.
Gotcha. And so you play banjo with some acts and do tell me a little bit about your banjo career.
Yeah, I picked that up when I was in college. I listened to a bunch of Pete Seeger records along with some like 60s folk stuff when I was in high school. But there was a guy named Mike West who was a banjo player and a songwriter from New Orleans who had come through the little part of Alabama where I was, and he'd play these gigs. And I was just sort of like, oh, well, that's what that's about. And so I thought, well, I want to try this songwriting thing. And I had a banjo, but he really sort of like cemented the idea that I wanted to play this instrument. And so, yeah, it took me about 4 or 5 years to like really sound like something. But I was still like trying to write songs and figure out what that was all about. And yeah, so I started playing banjo in my shows, and then I started getting gigs with bands. I was doing my own thing with my own songs, but then I started joining bands and playing in some, fairly traditional bluegrass bands, going to bluegrass festivals and that kind of stuff, which just being around the music was really great. And being around other players I could watch and sort of steal things from. It's also very beneficial. But yeah, so the band I have is called Banjolicious, and that's mostly original stuff from me. Now I'm in a band here called the Georgia Mountain String Band, which is there are 3 of us who are writers in the band, so we write original material as well as doing traditional bluegrass stuff. I'm in an old time band called Max and Maggie and the Driving Wheels, and so there's the bluegrass and old time. And there's a whole there's a whole dissertation there about the differences between those two. But suffice to say, those are the two sort of like the 2 groups I'm in here in town.
Nice. Do you have a banjo near you by any chance? We could hear a couple little things.
Oh yeah, I can get one. Hang on just a second to talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll play you the one that that I auditioned with for Emmett.
Yeah. What was the name of it?
It's called Biscuits and Gravy. Well, biscuits and gravy. Come on, baby, why don't you make me some biscuits and gravy? Now you can keep your bacon, you can keep your grits, tats, breakfast foods, gold, they are the pits. Only one thing that's gonna save me, and it's another plate of your biscuits and gravy. Yeah, biscuits and gravy. Come on, baby, why don't you make me some biscuits and gravy? Biscuits and gravy.
Awesome.
That's the one.
The one that got you in.
The one that got me in.
The one that got you in. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, sure.
Okay, and so one of the first times we ever met was at the Museum of Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, one of my favorite places on earth. I absolutely adore going there all the time. And you gave us this amazing tour of the space, which has dramatically changed over the years. Can you give me a little history about your history with the museum and how you got involved with it and the stuff you've done there and where it's going now?
Sure. I became aware of the center because even before they had the Henson collection they have now, they still had some, the Henson organization had donated Muppets to their permanent collection. So I knew that they had some Muppets on display, and that was a big deal to me to be able to see a Muppet up close. Because they existed on TV and everything, and I really wanted the opportunity to see one in the foam, as it were. Right. And, so I know I was a teenager. I must have been 13 or so, and we drove from visiting my grandparents in Birmingham to Atlanta. It's about 2.5 hours, and so we drove from Birmingham to Atlanta, and it was the middle of summer, and we got there and they were closed. Like they were closed because something had happened. They were remodeling or something. I think it was something with their air conditioning unit or something. But for whatever reason, they were closed. Brutal. And we had driven all that way, and I was heartbroken. And I sat in the car and cried. And my poor father, bless his heart, he tried to talk to the people in the administration section and like, "Can we please get in? We drove all the way." And nothing. They weren't having it. Mm-hmm. So we got turned away. The next time we went, we got in. I think we called ahead that time to make sure. And so we went and we saw the exhibit, which was phenomenal. They had a Mystic on display. They had Link and Strange Pork from Pigs in Space. as well as just the puppets from their global collection was just amazing. They had a lot of great stuff from other American puppeteers, as well as puppetry from all over the world that was represented.
All throughout time, it's
Yeah,
an expansive collection.
absolutely. And that's all because of the work of Nancy Lohman Staub. She is sort of the reason there is as much as there is in that collection. She was the curator for that collection. A lot of that stuff came from her own collection, but then she would acquire stuff for the center itself. We saw a show, and I think it was a shadow puppet version of Pecos Bill. And then we went back not long after that, and that's where I saw Terry Schneider for the first time, who was my mentor. And that was sort of like the boing. It was like he was a solo puppeteer who did all of this stuff. He built all the puppets. But anyway, those are sort of my first experiences with the center. And then I met a few of the people who were sort of in charge of things there through some puppet festival stuff. And I was going to Troy University at the time, which was near Montgomery, Alabama. And it wasn't that far to get to Atlanta, maybe 3 hours or so. And so I would drive up to Atlanta to see shows or do whatever. And that's how I became involved with actually doing shows. They would hire me to do like one-off performances for their fundraiser events and that kind of stuff. And that led to larger things. And then by the time I graduated from University of Connecticut, I did an 8-week run of my show, Billy Goat Scruff and Other Stuff, at the center. And that sort of was the beginning of a longer relationship of doing shows almost every year for a while there. And I still do, like everything permitting, I'm supposed to be doing a run of shows there in January. So fingers
right.
But
right.
the time
Adventures of the Gingerbread Man was one of the ones that was you've done there more recently.
Yeah. And I think Billy Goat Scruff and Other Stuff will be there in January. But yeah, I think I've run Gingerbread, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Billy Goat Scruff and Other Stuff has sort of been the 3 featured shows. I think Billy Goats has been there at least 7 or 8 times now. It seems to be a real box office smash when it plays. So, but you and I met. I had just moved back to Atlanta from New York and was sort of desperate for payment opportunities, like gigs. So at the time I was selling memberships in the atrium at the sort of lobby area of the center. And so that's what I was doing then. So in between like higher, performances in other places, on the weekends I was at the center trying to hawk memberships, which I hated doing unless I had a puppet on. Like if I had a puppet, I could totally do it with the puppet. And then I wasn't the salesman any longer. It was totally the puppet, which was fine.
Right.
So, but I interned there in '97. And that was kind of a real immersion into the whole world of the center. And because it was sort of an off-season time for an intern, I did a little bit of everything. I did some administrative stuff. I did some box office stuff. I built some stuff in the shop, it's like, and I worked a little bit with education. So I was kind of all over the building in that sort of, I think it was a month or 2 month period of time. I can't remember now. Right. But I sort of got a sense of how the whole organism worked.
That's amazing. It's an incredible thing. If people don't know about it, we're going to link it at the end of the video. So
it's the only thing of its kind in the United States and really the world. I mean, where they have 2 theater spaces, they have an education department, they have a museum with an immaculate and sort of unmatched collection of stuff of popular American culture puppets like Madam, the Muppets.
Right.
They've got some stuff from
the Corpse Bride.
Like Leica Studios, they've got Leica stuff.
Yeah.
Gumby, they have a Gumby.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just about they've got stop motion stuff. They've got the traditional Muppet style puppets that we're familiar with, as well as
they have some stuff from Broadway, from Lion King.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a real sort of broad scope of everything.
Yeah, and their special exhibits wing is also great. I've seen the Labyrinth exhibit and the Dark Crystal exhibit in there, and it's just an unbelievable experience to go in there and see those creations.
That was largely because of one guy named Russ Vick. Russ, so he was responsible for a lot of the latex restoration. When the Hensons donated their large gift to the center. I mean, a lot of that stuff was in really various stages of deterioration.
I remember
Latex
we actually got to see the
really
workroom briefly, and the Mystic was in there being worked on at the time. So,
yeah. Yeah, latex has a very short shelf life, and really all of that stuff was made just for the specific project it was in. It was not necessarily made to last through the ages. And so there was a lot of restoration that needed to be done before they were ready for public consumption. And Russ, he was really the one that created this technology for latex reconstruction and preservation. He's really like a mad wizard, because that stuff really didn't exist. Like, nobody was really doing it. And he had to figure it out in such a way that it still aligned with the protocols for museum conservation. Like, he couldn't just remake it. Like, it had to be,
right.
It had to be to standard, to museum standard, which is very specific and precise. But he was so good at it and created such methods that you look at these things and you'd swear they were just filmed yesterday. So
yeah, our Christmas exhibit it's just like that. You walk right up, and the Skeksis and the Mystics are just, I mean, they look alive right behind that plexiglass glass. It is unbelievable. So, well, you're very lucky, man. You've had a really cool career.
It's nice to have it in your back door. I mean, it really is. They rotate stuff out, especially in the Muppet section. They'll rotate stuff every 6 months or so. And
yeah,
so,
every time I've been there, there's something different.
Yeah, there's still stuff that hasn't been put out for the first time yet. So, I mean, it's really great. They got a lot of stuff in that gift. So the Museum of the Moving Image got some stuff, the Smithsonian got some stuff, and the center got some stuff too. So it's just, it's great that three of the major institutions in America have the greater works of Jim Henson at their, in their collections.
Yeah, hopefully we'll live forever in those. It's an amazing tribute to him. So, the master.
Hopefully we can all go to museums again.
I'm ready. So then let's talk about your personal kind of project. It's All Hands Productions. And so tell me a little bit, tell us a little bit more about that and what sort of services you provide. I know you do all sorts of different things, from seminars to library appearances, shows for kids.
Yeah, so the main sort of thrust of All Hands Productions is live puppet theater experiences that are created for families. They're not exclusive to children. Like, I don't target 2 to 5 year olds. They're a many layered experience where hopefully the grown-ups that have to come to the shows with their kids also have a good time, as much as a good time as their kids do. I try to make the shows fun for me too, so hopefully that transfers over, and it has. I've found it to be true that it has in the past. That the work that I find to be fun also transfers over for the audience. So that's primarily what I've done as far as like what the business consists of. And you're right, I do teach workshops occasionally. I teach a puppet making class at the John C. Campbell Folk School, which is in Murphy, North Carolina. Occasionally I'll do a manipulation workshop, but that's not something I really do on the regular. My bread and butter our gigs are library shows, and the shows are sort of 45 to 50 minute fractured fairy tales. I sort of take this like very popular, well-known fairy tale stories and mess them up. I sort of twist them. They're kind of like Bullwinkle and Rocky fractured fairy tales. Sure. But they sort of like play with your expectation about what's supposed to happen in the story and just sort of flip that all on its head. So, in my Jack and the Beanstalk, Rumpelstiltskin shows up. And it's like, because it's puppets and it can totally do that. And why shouldn't it? But yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing since really I was in high school. I mean, I was doing live shows all the way back then. So, but yeah, so I do libraries, schools, theater venues, festivals, all kinds of stuff, birthday parties. So,
bar mitzvahs. What's the most difficult thing about puppet performing for you? Like, what's the most challenging?
Performing? Probably figuring out ways to tell stories with just 2 hands, because I really can't have more than 2 characters up on stage at one time. So there's all of my stuff is pretty
most fast. Solo, it's just you.
Yeah, so all the shows are just me. So I write the shows, build the shows, perform the shows, book the shows. So I'm really a one-man operation. The only thing I really outsource anymore is the costumes. Like I have a great guy in town who makes all the costumes for my puppets because I've been lousy at that particular skill. So at least I'm smart enough to know the things I'm not good at to farm out.
There you go.
But that's kind of the most challenging thing for me is to figure out ways of telling these stories in an entertaining way that I can perform with two hands.
Right.
And then I do all the voices live, so everything's live. The only thing that might be pre-recorded is transitional music through the show, but everything else happens like I'm generating everything, voices and everything else. So yeah, that tends to be the more challenging part. I guess maybe the most taxing part are having to do multiple shows on a day. I'm good for about 2 or 3 shows, but anything over that, I'm kind of like, I'm dead.
What was your schedule like at the museum when you did like the Gingerbread Man and stuff? Were they multiple shows?
I think that was like a 13-show week. I think that's really a 2 show a day, 3 on Saturday. I mean, it's pretty brutal. Monday's your day off, so it's like Tuesday through Sunday. But it's great. I mean, you know, show at 10. You do a show at 10, then you do a second one at 11:30. So you know, by 1 o'clock you're back home. So it's great. Like it's a really great thing. And the great thing about the center is that mostly people are return people. I mean, you get a lot of people that are there for the first time, but you also get a lot of locals who come to the center all the time. So you get a discerning audience that know what good puppet theater looks like and know what that experience is. And so it's great to sort of have that experience too, where it's, you know, I still believe you have to be of a certain caliber to play that stage and to play that venue. And and the audiences know that. So there's a certain level of quality that you have to bring to it, which I have a certain standard that I feel I have to reach when I create a new show. So it's.
And you also have a great line of you build puppets and create puppets for sale. Tell us a little bit about that. That's under All Hands Productions too, as well, I guess, right?
So I have an Etsy
piles of puppets from little to big.
Yeah, I have an Etsy store, and you can search All Hands Productions there. The stuff that's there is more kid-friendly toy stuff. So I have little finger puppets and little glove puppets and some things called squirbles that are mouth puppets. And they're really not pro-level stuff. It's really just made to be, you know, entertain your kids or whatever. The pro-level stuff is sort of on a commission basis. Like I've found that it's sort of hard to just generate pro-level puppets and just put them out on the market for sale. Yeah. Mostly because they take too much work.
Right.
Occasionally I'll get a commission gig where somebody contacts me with an idea, and you know, we work out budget and all that kind of stuff. But it's pretty interesting. A lot of times people have a notion about what a puppet should cost, and usually that figure is a lot lower than what it actually should be.
Imagine that.
And I sort of have to explain, it's like, you know, you can't call up Martin Guitars, you know, one of the premier guitar makers in the country, and ask for a custom guitar and expect to pay less than what you would pay off the rack for, you know, a generic model. So you're really asking a craftsperson to create something that has taken me years to sort of figure out, and to assume that level of skill and craftsmanship and time is going to cost $150 is just kind of ridiculous. But you know,
they got spoiled by that Muppet workshop in FAO Schwartz. That's what it was.
Right, exactly. Man, and that's exactly the kind of thing I wish I had when I was a kid. Like that was the exact kind of toy I wanted. Was that? It was like, oh, Muppet, like that's what I want. Nobody made them. Like you couldn't find them at all when I was a kid. So.
The best you can do is buy one of the toys and tear it apart. Buy one of the stuffed animals.
I was doing the first year of Emmett Otter when those came out, when those Whatnots at FAO Schwartz came out. And I took a weekend, the day off, Monday was our day off from the show. and I took the train into the city. And on my day off, I went to FAO Schwartz and I bought the 3 styles. There were like 3
nice.
different styles. There was a blue one and a green one and an orange one. And I was like in the line. I was like waiting for them to open. It's like, I was going to buy me some Muppets. Come to find out, like Dave Goles had been there the day before. So it was like, ah! For those of you who don't know, Dave Goles is Gonzo. That was, Muppet royalty had just been in the day before.
Nice. Yeah, what an amazing setup at FAO Schwartz in New York. I did get to go visit that a couple times myself. I didn't get to take one home with me, but man, what a killer setup to.
Yeah, it was weird too. Like, yeah, but they were like forced choices. Like you could make eye choices and hair choices and nose choices and costume choices, but you had to pick them. Yeah. Like I remember there was one version of the puppet I didn't want to have a nose, but I still had to get one. So it's like they didn't put it on, but I still had to have a nose.
On the side.
You don't have to put the croutons on your salad, but you still have to have the croutons. So
oh my
it was kind of strange, but whatever. It was fun.
Cool. So yeah, we'll direct people to your Etsy page for that. One of the puppets that you created is getting quite popular right now is Chubbly.
Oh, Chubbly. Chubbly's here.
Is he there?
Yeah, Chubbly's here. Oh yes, hello everyone, and hello in podcast land.
Hi, Chubbly.
Wow. This is Zoom, huh? Zoom. All right, that's. Thank you. Hi. Hello, Mr. Max.
Hello. Good to meet you.
Do you have questions for me?
I do. I wanted to know, like, how long have you and David been working together?
That's a good question. I can't remember. I think it was like 2014 or 15, somewhere in there. So maybe about 5 years that he's sort of been around.
Right.
I'm gonna cover your ears. Okay, I'm not listening. It was sort of made as an experiment. A twofold experiment. I always wanted to play with the idea of a football head. So like I made the pattern pieces off of football, and I knew I wanted it to have this sort of mouth, this sort of weird underbite. And then I also wanted to experiment with a way to texturize the fur. So this Chubbly's fur was boiled. What? I know, don't. So it started out very sort of straight and fine, and then there's a process that you can boil the fur to sort of make it. I'll sort of zoom him in here, so you can get that sort of wonderful nap and that gnarly texture, like Oscar and some of those other Muppets. Yeah. So it was a twofold experiment to try and use a football shape and that method of fur creation. And little did I know, I just thought it was going to be a kind of throwaway puppet. What? No, not throwaway. But I didn't know he would morph into the character that he became. And he's sort of, he's become one of my favorites, and people seem to like him on the on the social media, and he just kind of emerged. Oh well, here I am, never to go away again. That's right. So,
and have you guys been doing any shows together, or did you do shows with him, or
he's not really in any of my live shows. Like I don't have a live show that's Chubbly based or that he's a part of. He's really just more for these one-off little video things that I make for Instagram or Facebook or whatever. That seems to be the world in which he exists. And this kind of thing where I'm either talking to people or kids or that kind of stuff where I'm having to do walk around and interaction with people. Like he's really good for that.
Oh yeah.
But, I really haven't found a show vehicle that I like for Chubbly.
He needs his own YouTube channel. I'm telling you, we gotta.
I think Chubbly and the Three Bears.
Oh. What about your friend Talford?
The porridge is too hot, but I'll eat it anyway. Okay, yeah, you'll eat it.
What about your friend Talford?
Oh, Talford? Talford is around. Talford is a new addition. And, it's real interesting when I make these things. Sometimes the character is kind of right there and it kind of locks in from the get-go. And sometimes they take a while. So I've still been playing around with Talford. He's so it's totally playing with the visual joke of like the tall, skinny one and the short, round one.
Oh yeah,
So
they make
is
great.
exactly what you imagine him to be. He's like this tall blue thing with eyes on the top of his head, and then Chubbly is the round counterpart. So,
They
but
make
I thought
they
it'd be
make a
fun to have a
fantastic
dynamic
combo.
relationship. What's that?
They make a fantastic combo.
Oh, we try. We singing together now.
I saw the
That's
song
right.
you guys did together. They were very impressive.
They did a duet version of "You Are My Sunshine."
Is that your
We're
favorite
still
song?
trying to figure out other songs we can do
What's
that
your
are not
favorite
copyright protected.
song? What's your favorite song, Chubbly? What would you want to do?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I like "You Are My Sunshine," "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." That's a good one. That's a popular hit. Old MacDonald Had a Farm. Yeah. Chubbly's not up on the popular music.
Hey, don't knock the classics. Don't knock the classics. All right, Chubbly, one more question for you.
Yeah.
What do you do on your off time? Do you have any hobbies that we should know about?
Hang out. Yeah, watch Netflix. A lot of Netflix. Eat cheeseburgers. Hang out in a bag. No, well, that's right. Sometimes he hangs out in a gym bag. That's transportation. I'm baggage. That's right.
Awesome. All right. So, how have you guys been handling the COVID pandemic in Atlanta? And what have you been doing in your spare time?
How have you been handling it, Chubbly? Well, sometimes I wear a mask, but I'm not wearing one right now. We should actually be 6 feet apart. That's right. We're not actually social distance right now.
No.
But I don't think it's been confirmed that puppets are carriers of COVID-19.
I don't.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. In fact, I should probably just get him to run all my errands since he can catch it or anything else. They won't give me a driver's license.
I can't imagine why.
No, or a credit card. Thank goodness. What would you buy if you had a credit card, Chubbly? What would you buy? Candy, lots of candy. Who wouldn't buy candy with a credit card? That's right. You buy banjos. You're right. I would buy banjos. Lots of expensive banjos. Who wants that? Me. So that's kind of it. I've been tinkering around in the workshop. I've been making stuff. I've had a couple of commission bills that have come in, but I've also been making stuff for fun. Yeah, I'm doing little videos and just trying to keep my creative mind occupied. We were talking about it before we came on, but as an introvert, this is not so different from my regular life outside of like not having paid gigs or anything. Like this is kind of, not that I sit at home and talk to puppets. Yes, he does. No, I stop that. But yeah, so it's like I'm not I'm not an extrovert. Like I don't thrive on the performance is kind of where I get that little bit of extrovertedness that I have fed. It's like that's that little part.
Right.
And even then, it's like an audience as a whole is kind of a different thing than having to deal with like going to a party. It's that whole like social anxiety kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, or a Walmart.
As an introvert, being at home and doing my own thing and kind of creating stuff is normal for me. So, like I said, outside of the loss of like paid gigs, this is it's a Tuesday. Is it? Who knows what day it is anymore? Nobody knows.
No idea. Well, fantastic. And so last, before we wrap this up, tell our readers and viewers where the best place is to go find stuff. You have an Etsy shop, but tell us where we can also follow Chubbly's adventures and your adventures, and give us a list of places. Give us the best places to find you on the internet.
Sure. Okay, our address is, no, don't give them our address. They could come over. Well, that would be nice maybe. So they can find me. I've got a YouTube channel. You can search All Hands Productions on YouTube. You can search All Hands Productions on Instagram. I have a website, All Hands Productions. I have a very outdated old blog called Puppets and Banjos, which and actually there's a whole blog about boiling the fur, not for Chubbly, but for another project. So that's kind of out there. I have a personal, well, there's an All Hands Productions Facebook page. I have a personal Facebook page, David Stevens. Yeah, so I'm just, if you search David Stevens Puppets or All Hands Productions or Banjolicious, you'll get all that stuff. And if you want to find more music stuff, I'm on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. So you can search all that.
Right on, fantastic. And we'll do some links at the end of the video as well. So,
great.
And we're going to say goodbye to you guys and put a pause on the video.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
Thank you very much, Chubbly. It was fantastic to meet you. I look forward to seeing you in Atlanta in person.
Yeah, me too. Stay safe, okay?
You too. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.